How the Church hid the true power of celibacy that Buddhism and Hinduism always knew. How the Church turned a spiritual practice into control. Have you ever wondered why the Catholic Church instituted mandatory celibacy for priests only in the 11th century? The answer will shock you. What is presented today as a fundamental Christian virtue was actually a political and economic decision that completely distorted the true spiritual purpose of this ancient practice. Imagine discovering that celibacy, before being a religious imposition, was considered by Eastern traditions as one of the most powerful tools for spiritual development. In Hinduism and Buddhism, this practice known as brahmacharya wasn't about repression, but about transmuting sexual energy into pure spiritual power. The first Christian priests were married. Peter, considered the first pope, had a wife. Paul wrote about the duties of Christian husbands. So what changed? In 1139, at the Second Council of the Lateran, the Church imposed celibacy, not for spiritual reasons, but to prevent ecclesiastical properties from being inherited by priests' children. It was about money and temporal power, not holiness. Meanwhile, in the East, Buddhist and Hindu monks had practiced celibacy for millennia, but with a profoundly different understanding. They knew that sexual energy, when not dispersed, could be channeled through the chakras, rising up the spine to the crown center, generating expanded states of consciousness and spiritual perception. Practical action. Right now, close your eyes for 3 minutes and observe where your vital energy concentrates in your body. Feel that internal force that Eastern traditions call prana or kai. Notice how it pulses in different energy centers. In Hindu Tantra, this energy is called Kundalini, a serpent of fire that, when awakened and sublimated, can lead to states of mystical ecstasy and transcendental wisdom. Yogis discovered that through conscious celibacy and specific breathing practices, this energy could be directed to awaken latent spiritual capacities. The difference is striking. While the Church used celibacy as a tool of control and conformity, Eastern mystics utilized it as a catapult to enlightenment. They understood that sexual energy is the same creative energy of the universe, and that consciously conserving and transmuting it can open portals of perception that most people can't even imagine exist. But here's what the Church never told you. The first Desert Fathers, like the Holy Fathers, studied in Eastern traditions. They knew these energy transmutation techniques. Anthony of Egypt, considered the father of Christian monasticism, spent years in the desert practicing methods very similar to Hindu yogis. The early Christian Gnostics possessed this knowledge. They practiced what they called the bridal chamber rituals, where sexual energy was completely internalized and directed to higher spiritual centers. That's why they were persecuted by the official church. They possessed the real knowledge that threatened institutional power. What's even more revealing is that some of the most powerful Christian mystics in history, like Saint John of the Cross and Saint Teresa of Avila, described ecstatic experiences that are practically identical to the samadhi states described in Hinduism. If this revelation impacted you, drop energy in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to the channel to discover more secrets that traditional religions have kept hidden for centuries. Why Tibetan monks can levitate and priests cannot. What you're about to discover will shake your beliefs about what really happens when someone practices celibacy consciously versus repressively. There's an astronomical difference between suppressing sexuality out of obedience and transmuting it through spiritual wisdom. In Tibetan monasteries, monks practice tummo, a technique that allows them to generate intense body heat through sexual energy sublimation. They can melt snow around their naked bodies in sub-zero temperatures. In Nepal, Buddhist monks develop psychic powers documented by science, including telepathy and clairvoyance. How is this possible? The answer lies in the energetic understanding that the East always possessed and that Western Christianity lost. In Hinduism, celibacy is practiced alongside specific pranayamas, breathing techniques that direct vital energy through the nadis, the subtle energy channels of the body. When this energy isn't dissipated sexually, it naturally rises through the sushumna nadi, the central energetic column, activating the higher chakras. Practical action. Try this right now. Breathe in deeply through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds, exhale through your mouth for 8 seconds. Repeat 7 times while visualizing golden light rising up your spine. This is just a fragment of what yogis have done for millennia. Meanwhile, Catholic celibacy is based primarily on repression and guilt. There are no energetic techniques taught, no understanding of the body's power centers, no methods of conscious transmutation. The result? Sexual frustration that often explodes in scandals that have shaken the Church's credibility worldwide. Vedic texts describe in detail how conserved sexual energy can be converted into oyas, a subtle substance that strengthens the nervous system and expands consciousness. Ancient Hindu rishis discovered that 40 days of conscious celibacy combined with meditation and mantras can awaken extrasensory abilities. In tantric Buddhism, there's a practice called karma mudra, where sexual energy is completely internalized and directed to higher chakras during deep meditative states. This isn't repression, it's pure spiritual alchemy. What's even more revealing is that some of the most powerful Christian mystics in history, like Saint John of the Cross and Saint Teresa of Avila, described ecstatic experiences that are practically identical to samadhi states described in Hinduism. They intuitively rediscovered these energy transmutation techniques, but their practices were considered dangerous or heretical by the official church. Francis of Assisi, before becoming a saint, studied with Sufi masters who knew these Eastern techniques. His intense mystical experiences and mastery over matter, like speaking with animals and levitating, were the result of this hidden wisdom that he adapted to Christianity. The truth is that celibacy, when practiced with esoteric knowledge, can open dimensional portals of perception, but when practiced through blind obedience, it becomes merely an energetic prison that blocks genuine spiritual development. The ancient Egyptian mystery schools taught similar practices. Initiates in the temples of Isis learned to channel sexual energy upward through what they called the Jed pillar, essentially the same as the Sushumna Nadi in Hindu tradition. If you feel your vital energy is being wasted or misdirected, write "awakening" in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to the channel to learn techniques that can transform your inner force into real spiritual power. How ancient Christian alchemists stole secrets from Hindu Tantra. Prepare yourself for a revelation that will completely change your perception of esoteric Christian history. The Templars, Rosicrucians, and medieval alchemists didn't invent their practices from nothing. They secretly studied and adapted tantric, Hindu, and Buddhist techniques that had existed for thousands of years. During the Crusades, Templar knights had direct contact with Sufi mystics and Hindu masters in the region we now know as India and Pakistan. They discovered that celibacy, when combined with specific visualization and breathing techniques, could generate what alchemists called the philosopher's stone, actually an expanded state of consciousness where transmuted sexual energy created supersensory perceptions. What the official church never admitted is that many Christian saints secretly practiced variations of Kundalini yoga techniques. Saint Benedict, founder of the Benedictine order, established monastic rules that included body postures, prayer schedules, and fasts that are practically identical to Hindu ashram disciplines. Practical action: sit with your spine straight right now. Place your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Breathe only through your nose, and visualize a golden light serpent coiled at the base of your spine. Hold this image for 2 minutes while breathing consciously. You just experienced a simplified version of Kundalini awakening. In Hinduism, this practice is called urdhva, the ascension of semen. It's not about sexual repression, but about transforming this primordial creative energy into fuel for spiritual evolution. Vedic texts explain in detail how 12 years of conscious celibacy, combined with pranayama, can awaken siddhis supernatural powers like telepathy, clairvoyance, and even bilocation. Saint Teresa of Avila described her mystical states using language practically identical to yogis. In Samadhi, she spoke of interior castles with 7 mansions, a perfect description of the 7 chakras. Her experiences of transverberation, where she felt a spear of fire piercing her heart, are classic descriptions of heart chakra awakening through Kundalini energy. The Christian Gnostics of the first centuries knew these techniques. They practiced what they called the bridal chamber rituals, where sexual energy was completely internalized and directed to higher spiritual centers. That's why they were persecuted by the official church. They possessed the real knowledge that threatened institutional power. Meister Eckhart, the great German mystic, wrote about experiences of detachment and fertile void that are pure Buddhist concepts. Jacob Bme described the signature of things, a direct perception of the subtle energy that permeates all reality, exactly as Vedics describe prana. The Sufi tradition in Islam also preserved these techniques. They speak of fan, the state where individual ego dissolves into universal consciousness through vital energy control. Rumi, the greatest Islamic mystical poet, described experiences identical to samadhi states described in Hinduism. The truth is that there's a hidden, esoteric Christian tradition that always knew how to use celibacy as a portal to altered states of consciousness. But this wisdom was systematically suppressed by ecclesiastical hierarchy because it represents a threat to centralized religious control. If you're beginning to realize there's much more behind these practices than you were taught, write Kundalini in the comments, leave your like, and subscribe to the channel to discover more secrets that connect all authentic spiritual traditions. What if you could access the same spiritual power as ancient masters? Now that you've discovered the hidden truth behind celibacy in spiritual traditions, the most important moment has arrived: how this millennial wisdom can transform your own spiritual journey, regardless of which religion you follow, or if you follow no religion at all. The secret that Hindu masters, Buddhists, and even Christian mystics knew is that sexual energy is the same force that creates galaxies, makes plants grow, keeps your heart beating. When you learn to work consciously with this energy instead of simply dissipating it, you connect directly with the creative power of the universe. In esoteric Judaism, the Kabbalah teaches about Yesod, the energetic foundation that connects physical and spiritual worlds. Kabbalists knew that sexual energy, when sublimated through specific practices, could activate what they called Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, literally. This isn't just theory, it's applied spiritual technology. Practical action. For the next 7 days, upon waking, before grabbing your phone or thinking about anything, place your hands on your heart and breathe deeply 3 times, visualizing your vital energy concentrating in the center of your chest. Then mentally direct this energy to the top of your head. You'll begin to feel a subtle but powerful difference in your daily perception. Esoteric Islam also knows these practices. Sufis speak of fan, the state where individual ego dissolves into universal consciousness through vital energy control. Rumi, the greatest Islamic mystical poet, described experiences identical to samadhi states described in Hinduism. The reality is that all authentic spiritual traditions independently discovered the same truths about transmuting sexual energy into spiritual power. The problem is that religious institutions, over the centuries, suppress this knowledge because it makes each person capable of having direct experiences with the divine, without needing intermediaries. Shamans of Native American traditions practiced power visions through fasting and temporary sexual abstinence. Ancient Egyptians used similar techniques in temples of Isis. Celtic Druids knew earth force that could be channeled through the human body when sexual energy was consciously directed. This means you, regardless of your religious or philosophical background, have access to the same spiritual potential as history's great masters. The difference isn't in special gifts or divine choices, it's in knowledge and conscious practice of these universal energy transmutation techniques. Celibacy doesn't need to be permanent to be spiritually effective. Conscious periods of sexual energy conservation and direction, combined with breathing, meditation, and clear intention, can open portals of perception you didn't even know existed within you. The ancient Greek mystery schools at Eleusis taught initiates to transform sexual energy through sacred rituals that induced profound spiritual experiences. Pythagoras and his followers practiced mathematical meditation combined with periods of celibacy to achieve what they called divine harmony. Indigenous Australian Aboriginal traditions speak of dreamtime energy that can be accessed through specific practices involving sexual energy conservation and connection with ancestral consciousness. If you feel ready to explore this hidden power within yourself, write transformation in the comments, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share with someone who also needs to know these ancestral secrets that can completely change your spiritual experience.